Good evening, everyone. My name is Dan Fogel, and those who don't know me, I'm a firefighter, Station 2 on A2 shift. On behalf of Kitchener Fire CIS Peer Support Team, I'd just like to welcome you all to our third Family Information Night. We are truly grateful that you've all taken the time to come out tonight and support this event.
And for anyone who doesn't know me, I'm Jody Rank. I am a firefighter at headquarters on B1 shift. Just to echo what Dan has said, there's been a lot of planning that went into this night, so we're extremely grateful for each and every one of you who took time out of your night to be here with us. Thank you very much.
Mental health, trauma, occupational illness, and PTSD are terms that have become mainstream in our culture. As first responders, we are exposed to events that increase our risk of a mental health injury. The purpose of tonight is not to share war stories or worry anyone, but rather provide information and resources to our members, along with those family members in attendance, to help them better identify, manage, and prepare some of the situations that may arise.
So just really brief before we get started, a couple of housekeeping items. If you haven't already noticed, we have washrooms in the back corner here. There's going to be an intermission, but at any point if you feel you want something to drink or something to eat, just help yourself. We have lots of delicious snacks back there, some coffee, some water. Just be mindful of the presenters that are up here and try to keep noise to a minimum. Like Dan mentioned, although we're not going to be covering anything too traumatic tonight, there may still be some topics covered or something said that might upset somebody or make somebody uncomfortable. So the firefighters in the room will know about our defusing situations when we have something at the halls. We have something called a runner, and that person is sort of keeping an eye on the room and making sure that if anyone who gets up maybe is uncomfortable, might need someone to talk to. So we have Dan sitting back here at a table. You put a hand up for us, Dan, please. So just if you get up and you're just going to go to the washroom or grab a drink, just kind of give Dan a nod or a heads up, just so that he doesn't chase you into the washroom or something like that, just to check in on you. For those of you who have attended our past family nights, this format tonight is going to be pretty similar. We're going to have about an hour and 15 of presentations to begin. We'll take a short intermission, and we'll come back and we'll wrap up with 2 more presentations. To start things off, I'd like to ask Fire Chief Bob Gilmore to step up and have a few words on behalf of fire management. Podium or mic? Okay, thanks, Chief.
Good evening. Like Jody said, my name is Bob Gilmore. I have the privilege of being the fire chief for the City of Kitchener. I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge and thank our entire fire management team. I see Deputy Gitzel, Deputy Davidson, and our HR Director, Dimitra Resendes, for all their leadership and collaboration working with the KPFFA and our department to develop, nourish, and champion our CIS and our peer support teams. As well, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention our former Chief John Rehill, our former Deputy Chief Rob Martin. They're pioneers, I feel, for our department, their dedication, passion, and commitment to our programs as well. I joined the fire department in 1991, so you can all do the math. Back when peer support was, kid, let me get you another beer. In 1998, when we were still at the old headquarters on Highland Road, I was a firefighter on A1 platoon. We responded to a fire call on Paul Ander Drive. Our crew was first in. Despite our best efforts and without going into detail, the end result was that 4 people perished in that fire. Critical incident stress management was in its infancy. The plan was for the crews to stay after work and attend a debrief. No surprise, no one was willing to stay. So, fire management, pretty savvy. They said, that's fine, you work till 5 o'clock, we'll have our debrief at 4 o'clock. And so they called the night shift in early to cover off, and we all went to Station 5 for a debrief. I remember being there, sitting in a circle with care professionals, psychologists, and others that I didn't know. Everyone in turn was asked, how are you feeling? Any guess on the answer from almost everyone? That's right, I'm fine. Question is, were we? Fast forward to tonight. The journey is far from over, but we should all be so proud on how far we've come. And we're all looking forward to continuing support and sustainability. Our fire management team, just so you know, our doors are always open. Always stop in. We're there for you. We'll listen. Thanks to Dan and Jody for organizing tonight and taking the lead. Thank you to Doug, Todd, and our CIS and peer support team. And thank you to all of you that are here tonight for your love, caring, and support for your firefighter and for our Kitchener firefighting family.
Thanks a lot, Chief. Our first presenter we have for you tonight is Chris Goodwin. Chris is our Health and Wellness Specialist with the City of Kitchener Human Resources. We've invited him to tell you a bit about changes to our EFAP program, our extended health benefits, and what resources are available to us as employees of the city.
Good evening. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, Jody. I was joking with Chief Gilmore earlier that you know you're not a firefighter when you're the one guy in the room with a full beard. So happy to be here, though. Happy to support you and speak to fire staff and their families. Tonight's meant to be a high-level overview of my role as a health and wellness specialist and to highlight some of the services that we have available to all of you. I joined the city literally 1 week before the pandemic started, so March 9th of 2020. And for most of the last two and a half years, I've been kind of pulled away from my core work and have been helping with running around delivering rapid tests to different fire stations, helping out with COVID isolation guidelines, vaccine policies, not really getting to dive into the work that I love, which is supporting employee health and wellness. But thankfully, that's behind us now, and I'm able to dive into the work that I love to do. So why are we here? Why are we talking about this? Ultimately, we're talking about it because we want to be able to share with you tonight all of the various supports that you have available. And the way I sort of see support for employee mental health is, there isn't one person or one program or one organization that can do it all. But rather we're a tapestry. We're kind of an interwoven group of individuals, programs, processes, community partners that we can see around the room, here to support you. And that includes families as well. So I see myself as one small part of that. I'm within the Human Resources Division at the city, and we have a small army of people in our HR division that are here to support you as well. And you may not always see the impact or speak to them directly, but I can vouch for them. They're all great people, and they're here to help you. So humbled to be here. Thanks again for the invite. And in the time that we have together, as Dan mentioned, we're just going to cover off sort of high-level supports, but I will be available at the intermission and throughout the evening if you have any specific questions. And I encourage you to email or call if you have any questions as well. So this is just a kind of a quick overview of what my role is in my portfolio. So within the HR division, I support our Sun Life short-term disability support program, the long-term disability program. Both of those are for non-occupational or non-workplace injuries and illnesses. So that wouldn't be your any sort of occupational injury or illness or WSIB claim, but all the other ones. So if you're up on a ladder and fall off on the weekend and hurt your arm, that's me. You get to talk to me. And that's always with support from your fire admin staff as well. So you may not hear from me directly, but I'm kind of in the background helping out people like Vicky and Ange at fire headquarters. So I'm not going to spend too much time on the Sun Life program tonight because I really do want to focus in on our employee assistance program. But if you do have any questions about short-term or long-term disability, feel free to reach out to me or to Ange, and we'd be happy to help you with that. Sun Life Group benefits, those are your benefits for things like paramedical services, psychological support, medication, those sorts of things. Again, we have a small but mighty HR benefits team that leads that work, but I'm happy to field any questions when it comes to the benefits around mental health and psychological support. So I'll speak about that really quickly, but I do want to focus, as I said, mostly on our employee and family assistance program. So just quickly, and this may be a reminder for most of you, but in terms of the paramedical services and support for psychological services, and this is current as of the collective agreement today. This, of course, could change in the future, but as of right now, for fire suppression and also non-suppression and non-civilian roles, Sun Life will cover 100% of services for these professionals that are listed here. So that could include licensed psychologists, psychotherapists, social workers, family therapists, and that's up to a maximum of $2,000 per person in a benefit year. So again, just wanted to provide that as a high-level overview. I won't get into the nuances of that, but that's what's available to fire staff in terms of psychological support that you're looking for, where you're being billed for it or being invoiced for it. But kind of in the meat of the presentation is going to be around our Employee and Family Assistance Program, or EFAP. I'm not going to say the whole term all night because it's a mouthful, but we'll refer to it as EFAP. This is a service that's available through Homewood Health. So the city has a contract with Homewood, and this is a service that's free to staff and their families. It's available 24/7. It's available either through the 1-800 number or online at homeweb.ca, and it's a confidential service. So there's no names that are shared back with the city, no identifiers to let us know who's using it. I'm the only one who gets the summary report, and all it tells us is the number of people that have engaged in the service. It doesn't break it down by division, it doesn't break it down by individual, just kind of a high-level overview of who's using it. So there is truly confidentiality when it comes to using that service. In terms of who's eligible, again, we've mentioned that it's employee and family assistance program, so it's all City of Kitchener staff. That's full-time, part-time, temporary. There's no waiting period either, so if you're a brand new hire, it's not like some benefits where there's a waiting period. You have access to this service immediately. Retirees and their family members can also access the program for up to 3 months post-retirement. Doug, I think you're just outside the 3 months, are you? So the F in EFAP, this is a question that I get a lot. What constitutes a family member? So long definition here, but kind of the nuts and bolts of it is an employee's legal partner, married or common law, would have access to the program. Dependents as well, so that's defined as unmarried, unemployed dependent children, and that can be natural, adopted, or stepchildren, and it can be the children of a common law spouse as well if they're living with you. Dependent children are up to 21 years of age or up to 26 if they're enrolled in post-secondary education. So it truly is family. And again, full access of services. There's no difference between the service level that an employee receives versus a family member. One of the things I really wanted to highlight today was just the fact that the EFAP is really more than just counseling. I think when we think of EFAP, we think automatically of counseling. There's a whole suite of services beyond just counseling that are available too. And I've left a few handouts on the tables, and there's kind of a laundry list of services that are available here, including coaching. So things like you can call up the 1-800 number and have a legal consultation for free. Financial advice if you're looking to, financial planning, budgeting. There's also things like smoking cessation, nutrition, so a lot more than just counseling. And Homewood Pathfinder, which is kind of in the top left-hand corner, this is really the new upgrade and service enhancement to our EFAP. And Homewood Pathfinder is the online portion of the EFAP. So once upon a time, The only option was to have the 1-800 number. You call up, you speak to an intake counselor, and they point you in the right direction. The really exciting thing, and I truly do think it's exciting, but I also am kind of a nerd for this kind of stuff, is that gives so much more power and user friendliness back to you. So for example, you could log on, and this is just a few little screenshots of what it looks like. There's a bit of a pulse check on how you're doing. You know, you can answer, I'm doing really well, not so well, I'm struggling. And the whole experience will be catered to a series of questions that they ask the user. One of the best parts of the new Pathfinder offering is the ability to book appointments directly over your phone, virtually. So rather than, again, picking up the phone and kind of being sent to somebody and kind of roll of the dice, you can go in, you can look at the bios of counselors, you can look at their availability, you can choose whether you want to meet in person, over the phone, virtually. So just a lot more flexibility in terms of how you access the Employee Assistance Program. Another program I wanted to focus on is called Sentio, and this is the online cognitive behavioral therapy option through Homewood. It's all online, it's all self-paced, and a lot of the research that's coming back now around cognitive behavioral therapy is saying that online can be just as effective as in person. So, you know, if for whatever reason, you know, we all have different tolerances when it comes to going and meeting with people face-to-face, maybe we don't want it to be obvious to those around us that we're doing so. This is a great option where you can access cognitive behavioral therapy on your phone, and again, self-paced. You get to set your goals and you're working with a clinician behind the scenes, but virtually over your phone. My best advice when it comes to all of these new service offerings is to set up an account. So download the app on your cell phone, set up an account for yourself, for family members if they're interested, and just play around with it. You can play around with the online resources. You can check out Sentio. I tried to go as far as actually booking an appointment the other day with some of my colleagues, and I think I accidentally did book an appointment. But yeah, play around with it, get used to it. I think you'll be impressed by how much this service has evolved in the last couple of years. Wanted to spend just a few minutes speaking about resources through Homewood that are fire specific, and I think could be a real benefit to you and your families. One is the Trauma Care for First Responders. This is a program through Homewood that pairs you with a clinician who has experience with working with first responders. It's developed for mid to long-term treatment for employees experiencing symptoms of trauma. It's specifically for those that are still on the job and working. It includes cognitive behavioral therapy, resiliency training, and online mindfulness tools, and is targeted for those who are struggling with mid to long-term and acute trauma symptoms. Probably not best suited for those who are off work, as I mentioned, mostly for those who are still working, or those that are experiencing something that would probably benefit more from in-person psychotherapy. So a lot of this, again, is virtual, but parts of it can be set up to be in person as well. So as it says there on the bottom, it's 20 hours of individual treatment, and you're, again, partnered with a clinician who has a lot of experience with dealing with first responders and their unique needs. One of the great things about it is there's no waiting list, so it's kind of rolling intake. So obviously waiting lists and the shortage of mental health resources are a big thing nowadays, but this is a program where they can have immediate intake, and so you're not waiting. So again, it's as easy as a phone call to Homewood to set this up. They'll ask you a few questions just to make sure that you're a good candidate, and away you go. You'll be in the program, and hopefully it would be a support to you as well. Shift worker support. This is another program unique to Homewood, helping individuals like yourselves who are dealing with some of the stresses around working shifts. That can be both impacts to you, staying healthy, sleep hygiene, also impacts to your family. So how to develop strategies to manage responsibilities in your health, how to keep family relationships harmonious. Again, kind of developed specifically for first responders and those who work shifts, understanding some of the unique stresses of the job. Childcare and parenting is another offering through Homewood as well that, so again, something that maybe doesn't come to mind immediately when we think of our employee assistance program, but something that's available. And this is available for both KFD staff, but also for all City of Kitchener staff. What this looks like is you would be paired with a childcare specialist, and they can help you through a variety of different needs. It can include childcare resources, so things like daycare, after-school care. They can actually work on your behalf to find those in the community. I really wish I had had this a number of years ago because I can remember that being stressful. They can help with things like blending families, again, how to create a harmonious family structure. Children with special needs, they can provide different tools and resources for you with that as well. So something that, you know, again, many resources, but it was something that I thought might be relevant tonight, just as another layer of support to you as either new or existing parents. And one of the last things I wanted to focus on, and this will be new, I think, for most people in the room, and it's something that I've been working on with Homewood kind of behind the scenes, is making sure that when you do access services through Homewood that you're being paired with somebody who understands first responders. And I think that's something that I've heard from a variety of different stakeholders, from fire management, from frontline staff. I think when I've spoken to the CIS team before, I remember having a conversation with Deputy Chief Martin early on in my time, and I think this was sort of a consistent message that I was hearing back from folks is, you know, I pick up the phone, I call Homewood, and it's just kind of, you know, they're going to pair me with somebody and I'm going to have to explain the work that I do. They may not understand what fire staff do. They may not understand if it's a family member calling what my partner is going through. And so that's a barrier, I feel. I think that's a barrier to accessing the right kind of service. I think it's a barrier to having to explain yourself and hope that you're being paired with somebody who gets it. So where we are right now is that fire staff and their families can call up Homewood and request to be paired with a counselor, and they'll ensure that you are paired with somebody who has experience working with first responders. What's coming soon, I had to leave you with a little bit of a teaser, right? What's coming soon will be, that'll be an automatic process when you either call the 1-800 number or when you access online services. So you'll indicate, you know, employee of City of Kitchener or family member of a City of Kitchener staff member, and then you can click, yep, first responder, and that'll happen automatically. So if you forget to ask or you don't feel comfortable asking, that'll happen automatically. So both for fire staff and their families, they'll ensure that you're paired with the right type of clinician. So I think that's a huge win for us. That's not something that we've had in the past. But I'm excited for that, and I'm hopeful that that will provide kind of a new layer of support for you and your families. I was told I had 15 minutes. I think I did pretty well. I didn't want to have the Oscar hook come at any point. But that's it. I know we worked through a lot of material pretty quickly there, but as I said, I'll be around to answer any questions you may have. I'm available anytime via email or phone. Would love to have a chat with you. Would love to speak more about the supports that we have both with Sun Life, with Homewood. And again, a real honor to be here with you tonight, and hope you found that helpful. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Thanks.
Not sure why I'm holding a mic when there's a mic on the podium, but we'll run with this. It does sound better, doesn't it? Yeah. Thank you very much, Chris. Our next speakers are Barb and Doug Sharp. I think for most of us in the room, Doug probably doesn't need an introduction, but for those of you who don't know Doug, he's a recently retired captain with the City of Kitchener, coming off of A1 shift out of Station 6, having served 30 years with the KFD. Doug was instrumental during the early stages of our CIS team to really push and advocate for our program. I really think that without his help and the push that he has given over the years, this team wouldn't be where it is today. He's contributed 20 years to the CIS team, over 20 years, and continues to give countless hours to promoting peer support and mental health for first responders. Joining Doug tonight is his wife, Barb. Barb works for the Waterloo Region District School Board on the Behavior Intervention Team, and together they are here to share their experiences and how they navigated through their various struggles over the years. To present When Fire Gets in the Way, please join me in welcoming Barb and Doug.
That one to Barb.
Just need a minute, just tell me. Of course.
We're doing it this way. Okay.
You want your own mic?
Sure.
Okay.
Hi.
This is my wife, Barb.
This is my husband, Doug.
It's great to see everybody out tonight. Kind of the idea with this talk is everybody has a different story. Everybody has a different journey. We have one, and it's something we want to share, and maybe explain what we've gone through, how we've got through it. We've been together now 30 years, been retired 3 months.
Still married?
Barb loves having me home every night, apparently. So this is our journey we'd like to share with you. This is our fire family.
Mm-hmm. Okay, a little disclaimer first. First of all, if you cannot hear me, please tell me. Our journey is something that is unique to us, just like your journey is unique to you. That goes without saying. But we're hoping that some of the things that we share tonight, maybe you can connect to. Right? My disclaimer is this is not my forte. It's his. Standing up in front of people and talking is tough, but I can do hard things. So I'm going to share some things with you that we've experienced and hope that you can connect with that. And being married to Doug for 28 years, yeah, I can do hard things. I can do hard things.
Really?
Yep.
Difficult? What's more difficult? What's more difficult?
This or being married to you? Okay, next slide. Okay.
Okay, this is me. I get hired 1 year after our chief, Gilmore, 1992. And so, hey, I have the job I want. I've always wanted it, worked hard for it, ready for anything. I know there's going to be some difficult stuff, but whatever. But what I figured out is you don't know what you don't know. And I thought I knew, but I didn't know. And you never really know how you're going to handle things till you're in the middle of it. Nobody really gave us much heads up 30 years ago on what we're getting involved with. That's partly why we kind of do these talks, to just build some awareness that it's a great job. I still loved it. I still love it, but there are things we have to consider in this job to keep ourselves safe and healthy. So we all can retire with 30 years, and we all can live to be 100.
100?
100, okay. So I get on the job, and I got this, right? Like tough calls. It became apparent pretty quick that there's There's some difficult calls out there, stuff that you never thought you would see or have to deal with. But they're there. But I got this. You know why? Because I'm going to avoid it. I'm not going to pay any attention to it. I'm going to shove it down really deep, and I'm going to go home. And nobody's going to know how tough the job is, because I'm going to be like fantastic at hiding everything. And I did a great job.
Yeah, no, not so much, son.
All right.
He didn't bring it home in words, because no, he didn't tell me what happened that night on shift, or he didn't tell me how he felt about, what happened earlier in the day. So I didn't hear the words, but he brought home the actions and the reactions. I can switch sides with you. Is that okay?
Yeah.
1992, Doug got on the job. It was so exciting. I was so proud. We were living the dream, right? Great job. So thrilled to be a fire family and to be part of the fire family. And what you need to know is 30 years later, I'm still thrilled to be a part of the fire family, and I consider myself part of the fire family. So, sense of pride, comfort in knowing that I was surrounded by people that cared. We embraced it as a couple, and eventually with the kids, we embraced it as a family. So we would do parades, we would go to the memorials, we would stop by and see Dad at the hall. My kids even had a little song they used to sing. Daddy at the hall, Daddy at the hall, doody-doody-doody-doo, Daddy at the hall, when we drove by. It was our family. We were a fire family. So those parades and the gatherings and all those kind of things we did for 30 years. In fact, it was my pleasure to be at Doug's walkout at the end of December. 30 years. And you know who was there? My kids, my mom, my brother, because it's a family. And that's what family do. They show up for each other. But somewhere along the way, oh, that's Doug. Handsome, eh? See that big smile? Yeah, we were pretty excited. Somewhere along the way, things changed a little bit. I'll kind of describe it like maybe some clouds moved in. Now, the clouds moved in. Sometimes they were dark, sometimes they were gray, sometimes they were light and fluffy. And they came and they went, and sometimes they were thick and sometimes they weren't. But some of the clouds became very distinct. Some of those clouds that moved in. The cloud of anger, the cloud of frustration over reactions. Not all the time. Let's be real here. Not all the time, but they showed up. Right? The having to have things done a specific way. Finding fault without considering the big picture.
Dishes.
There's
these little triggers that I realized I overreacted to, but I'd leave for work at 7 in the morning, and then I would come back 24 hours later, and there'd still be dishes on the counter. Like when I left, there was dishes on the counter. I came back 24 hours later, there's dishes on the counter. And I was angry, like way too angry for a couple dishes on the counter.
And that's my question. I get it. You're angry. But do you have to be so angry?
That angry? I was that angry?
Not about the dishes. How about the cloud of emotionally unavailable? Yeah, the cloud of emotionally unavailable. So I get home from work. Yes, I work for the school board. There might be some ranting involved in that. And sometimes I just want to be able to say it and not have it fixed, not have it solved. I just want to rant. But sometimes there's no room for that. Sometimes the kids just want to play. Or they want to tell Dad a story. And it's funny because our kids, aren't little anymore. So when they wanted to play and Dad didn't want to play, well, okay, whatever, they went and did something else. But as they get older, they're so smart. They'll talk to Doug and they'll see it in his eyes. In fact, it's so distinct when he does not have the emotional capacity to hear their story that they actually call it crazy eyes.
Still to this day.
Yeah, that was last week.
23 and 26, and they call me crazy eyes.
Crazy eyes. Maybe you've seen crazy eyes at your house. I don't know, but we've seen them at our house. That's a cloud. Again, not all the time. Sometimes not predictable. Often not predictable. But the cloud of intolerance, the cloud of resentment. What happened to my friendly Doug guy that was empathetic? That empathy seems to disappear sometimes when that cloud comes in. And generally, well, that's not generally. Sometimes he doesn't like people. Even the people I know he loves. That's a cloud of intolerance and resentment. Or how about that plan that is meticulously planned out, that we have to shift our plan? Whew. We're not really good at shifting plans.
You mean I don't pivot very well?
Don't pivot very well. What's really cool is that through this whole process and talking about this, we actually had some pretty tough discussions with our kids, and it was Mason that pointed that out. Our son, he's 25. He said what he noticed was the inability to pivot.
So it took me a while to figure this out, but when I'm not liking people, I just want to be alone. I'd rather disengage and not spend time with family or friends and just isolate because it was safe. That's when I knew the cloud was there. Mm-hmm. Happened for a long time before we actually realized what was going on, but now we see it.
It's not all the time. Again, it's not all the time.
Very little, right?
Yes, very little. But it comes and goes. The triggers. Maybe you can relate. When you finally have that moment when you're not both busy and you're spending time together and we're present there for each other. And you're there and we're together. And then something shows up and it's gone. Oh, the triggers. That night we were going out for dinner and I got dressed up and I put on my shoes. You know, the ones with the heel on them, the leather soles, the slippery shoes.
Yeah.
Slippery shoes. That's a trigger.
Significant call. I won't go into details, but we labeled it slippery shoes.
Yeah.
So that's a trigger Barb didn't know about.
Didn't know. They were slippery shoes.
Remember, I hide stuff really well, right? I bear it down. Barb never knows. So
How about that walk? When we're walking in the woods, it's a beautiful day. And over in the corner there, I'm like, oh, what's that? It's a blue tarp. Who knew? A blue tarp is a trigger.
A lot of homeless people in Kitchener, a lot of tarps, a lot of encampments where people are living on the street. And it's pretty sad to see that. There's a lot of anger and people eating out of garbage cans. And what's really sad is when you're a homeless person and you live in a tarp and your tarp burns up, then now you're really homeless.
Sad.
Barb doesn't know that.
I don't know that. We're on a walk.
But it creeps in every once in a while.
It's a blue tarp. But then that present isn't there anymore. Or Megan wanting to have to watch TV with her. What are you going to watch? How about Grey's Anatomy? Ooh, even better. How about This Is Us? That ain't happening, because that's a trigger.
No drama in those shows.
No drama.
It got so bad with Megan, she'd want to watch shows with me, and I had a list of things that had to happen or not happen in a show to watch it. So she came up one day with a movie. She says, Dad, we got to watch this movie. It's a really good movie. But there's none of this, and this, so it's a safe movie for you. Well, the opening scene is a mother who loses two babies in birth or something. So like 2 infant fatalities right there. Okay, I'm out. So I lose time.
Even when you try to avoid the triggers.
Trying to do it, trying to avoid the triggers, and it affected the family life. Mm-hmm. So I've missed a lot of time with my kids watching shows because not every show is appropriate.
Mm. One last one. Cell phones. I work at the school board and with kids. Cell phone's not often on. Sometimes I can't answer. Sometimes I don't want to answer. Who knew cell phones can be a trigger.
Cell phones are tough. I'm sure most first responders in the room, we've been on calls and MVCs where we're trying to extricate people, and there's a cell phone on the chair beside us, the seat, that keeps ringing, and then it stops and it keeps ringing. And it's obvious that's their loved one looking for them because they know something's not right. So when people don't answer cell phones, where do you think I go?
Yeah.
To the negative. Yeah. So cell phones. If I call you, please answer your phone.
Roller coaster of emotions. Anyone else here feel like sometimes they're walking on eggshells at home? Yep. Don't want to say what you're really thinking because it's not the right time. It's not going to make things any better. A roller coaster of emotions. So at 9 o'clock in the morning when we're having coffee, and I don't know, anybody in this room that's ever had Doug cook for them? Wow, he's a cook. And he says, let's have whoever over for dinner. It's a great plan at 9 o'clock in the morning. So we invite everybody, we plan everybody, but then sometimes things switch. So at 9 o'clock in the morning, what's a good plan? At 5 o'clock, not so much. Right?
Yeah, so those highs and lows are difficult. And when I hit the low, I know I might have ruined a situation or made things more complicated, so that makes me feel bad.
Yeah. It's hard to watch, because I know he wants to cook for you. I know he wants to have people over, but he can't. That's hard to watch. The crazy eyes. I know he wants to hear the kids' stories. I know it, but he can't. So then we have this big cloud that comes and goes, and again, it comes and goes. It's not all the time. It's not all the time. But there's been lots of times I'm like, what is wrong with you? And when I ask myself that question, I think, maybe that's not the right question. The question isn't what's wrong with you. Maybe it's what's happened to you.
Yeah, WTF sometimes Barb would be saying, what the fuck's going on here?
Yeah.
How can things change so quick on a dime? Some bad calls and situations.
Bad call.
But I think we understand it a little bit better now. I think that is basically the gist of this talk tonight, is that things are going to happen, but through experience and self-awareness and trying to figure things out. Trauma is a big thing, and I think there's a lot of trauma with first responders. So the big question that everybody has with trauma is what's wrong with the person. But really the question should be what happened to them, because once you can meet them on that plane of what happened to them, then I think you can move forward and get past it.
It shifts your perspective a little bit. Right? It makes a difference to ask that question. Not what's wrong with you, but what's happened to you.
So, impact. So who does this impact? Well, obviously it impacts me, but that's not really what's most important to me. It impacts my family. This is the family. Just for the record, Mason is not taller than I am.
He's totally taller than he is.
So the impact of what we do, this job, I think, from my perspective, does have an impact on us as individuals. And it has an impact on our family. And it's very evident when we sit down and talk to our kids now, especially since they're adults, and they tell us stuff. And that's what kind of motivated this talk, is they told us some stuff, and it was hard sometimes to hear. Both my kids will not be first responders in any way, shape, or form because of what they've lived through, and they've seen it. But the communication's there. That's the important thing. So the real thing about tonight's talk is family. There's a lot of resources out there for first responders. There's a lot of more information, PTSD, all these studies. But what is not really covered is the family. The people at home are overlooked quite a bit. And it's important for the people at home to understand what's going on, because who's the first person that noticed when I was struggling? Barb. And she would tell me, and that helped me. Right? So the people at home are important. We have a quote here from Romeo Dallaire. Unless you give the same sense of priority, the same sense of urgency, and the same level of care to the members of the family as to the members who have been affected, you will never achieve your aim. You will not bring them back to a level that they can live with themselves and ultimately be still useful in the community. So we need to engage the people at home. We need to give the people at home resources, information on how to help themselves and help their first responder at home. So that is all kind of pretty dark stuff, but that's kind of the journey in the last 30 years. We're still here, so there's hope. It can work. It takes some work, but it can be good. After all of that, I still wouldn't have changed being a first responder. I might have done things a little differently at home, but I still enjoyed the job. So the last little bit of our presentation will be, now what? So what did we do once we recognized what was going on to try and mitigate the problem and be successful?
The clouds are going to come and the clouds are going to go. I've said that a few times, it's true. And I don't know if they ever really go away, but I know the time not to deal with them is right in the middle of it, when you're standing under that cloud. So you need to make a plan. You need to talk about it. You need to communicate. We needed to communicate, because this is really about Doug and I. We needed to communicate. Right? We used to talk about the plan, and then it's only recently that we said, you know what, it's a team plan, because you have to be committed as a team. Just like we've committed to fire as a family, we commit to each other as a team, with communication being the root of that. All right, here's some of the things that we talk about, that we consider.
So the switch, this is something we realized, and I'd like to talk about it a little bit right now. So I think there's two modes I recognized, responder mode and home mode, and I use these terms quite a bit. We realized that a lot of times the confrontation came like when I got home from work or that first day after work. We started to realize it was a pattern. So these two modes. So responder mode. What is responder mode? Responder mode is the person I have to be at work. So when I'm at work, what do I have to be successful? I need to make quick decisions in a high-stress, high-consequence, no-fail situation. I need to take control. I need to be decisive. I need to solve problems and fix problems. That's my job. My job is to fix stuff. We're professional fixers. We show up at these calls with no information, and we have to make split-second decisions and solve a problem. Catastrophize. Barb loves this. So I catastrophize at work. I show up to a scene, I have a house fire. I have to look at the absolute worst scenario, work my way back. I have to make a strategy, then some tactics, and I have to hand out the tasks. That's what I have to do.
Can I share something that, just from tonight, to know that sometimes you never get out of responder mode?
This is not in here.
Just a second. We're driving here tonight, and Doug says to me, I put the presentation on a stick. I'm like, why? In case I drop my computer. In case you drop your computer? That is catastrophizing.
Okay, so I'm a planner. Isn't there more planning?
Uh-huh.
So catastrophizing is something I need to do at work. That's my job. How is catastrophizing when I'm off work and in the general public? Is that a good thing to catastrophize all the time? I'm seeing no heads nod, so I think it's not bad.
Okay.
The other thing I need to do when I'm at work is I need to disconnect from my emotions and feelings. And I think I have to do that because you can't get caught up in the moment and all the in the sadness and what's going on in a call. You have to make these decisions. And when we disconnect from our feeling brain, our amygdala, we can make decisions quick. We get our job done and we complete the job. There's no time for feelings and getting in emotions. And then we get the job done. So Now, this is me at work. Now, I go home in the morning. Does this Doug, is that going to be the best father and husband to my people at home? No? Catastrophizing all the time? Probably not good. Taking control, fixing it all the time? Not good. They actually expect me to have emotions when I come home. They want to play, they want emotions. So then there's home mode. In home mode, I need to be patient, nurturing, caring, not a fixer, relaxed, mad chill. And I have to reconnect with my emotions and my feelings, because that's what my family needs. So, this is the question. The switch is, when does that happen? I get off at work at 7 a.m. To 7:01, I'm like good to go home, and I'm like going to be nurturing and caring and emotional and go home and give my kids a hug and be the best dad ever. Does that happen right away? Does that happen right away for everybody here? Okay. So the switch is recognizing now that I'm still in responder mode when I go home.
Mm-hmm. So there's, it's kind of a sick joke that, coming home is always at 7 o'clock. Oh, when you have to get the kids ready for school and breakfast and pack your bag and get out the door and we have to wait for the switch. I don't have time for that. I don't have time for that. But it's a reality. Like a lot of these things are. So you have to make a plan, right? I know when Doug comes home, I need to give him time and space. There's not a long list of things to do because it's not going to go well for us. Right?
Yeah, so basically our plan was when I come home, Barb would give me space. Half of my career, we worked the old shift, 10-14s. So our days were 10s and our nights were 14. So I come home at 5 o'clock.
Oh, even better, dinner time.
So I walk in at 5 o'clock, had a difficult day, and I get 1,000 questions and 1,000 jobs to do. It probably didn't go that well.
No.
So our plan for that was to give me time to try and make that switch.
Mm-hmm. Doug used to leave the fire hall and stop and have a coffee and sit in his car and have a coffee. It was time for the switch.
It's different for everybody. Some people I talk to have showers to
go for a run
or do something purposeful to try and get out of that mode. Mm. So that's the switch. That's the way I look at the switch, the two modes. So our next plan item was?
We need to plan about the kids. So, love them to bits. Protect them. Care for them. That's a no-brainer, right? But what happens when we protect them from what Dad's bringing home? We did that. And we can look back on that now and go, I might have done something different if I had to redo. We don't have a redo. So
no redos.
So our answer to the kids was, Dad's just tired. Dad's just tired. But he wasn't. He was, but he wasn't. That wasn't just it. And the kids, and Megan and Mason both told you, the kids filled in the blank. So when Dad was mad, is he mad at me? When Mom is sad, is she sad because of me? The kids need a plan. The kids need language. The kids need, they need language. They need a time to talk. They need time to be listened to, because a lot of this doesn't make sense to them, right? Find the language, find the labels of emotions that are appropriate for their age, and help them understand. Because our kids at 25 and 23 remember filling in the gaps.
So give them communication, give them the tools. Kids are smart. If we don't explain what's going on, they're going to fill in the gaps, and usually that's going to be a negative, and they're going to own it. Next one.
Ownership. Okay, this is part of our plan too, right? Because the reality is, it's not just him. That whole team thing, we're a team together. Ownership. Own your shit. It's me too, sorry.
Own your shit.
Yeah, that's me too, right? So when we are relating and we're dealing with those clouds, how am I feeling? What is working for me? What is not working for me? What is working for him? What is not working for him? I have to be responsible for my own emotions and my reactions to things. I need to know when I need help, when I need to talk to somebody. I need to know what works for me. Going to yoga, walks in the woods, hopefully with not blue tarps, but walks in the woods, just for me. Meditation in the morning, that works for you, right? So we committed to each other that we will take care of ourselves so we can take care of each other, because a better me is a better we.
Just to go back a little bit on triggers. So the worst thing for triggers for me is I have triggers that Barb doesn't know about. Now she knows about them. Now she's triggered.
Yeah.
So now she's triggered by blue tarps. Now she's triggered by railway tracks. She's triggered by when orange buzzes our house. We know what's happening. She knows what's happening. She knows why orange is in the air. So it doesn't matter how much we try and hide it. Everything filters down to the family.
The voice. Okay, here I'm going to be real here. Sometimes when those clouds are there, I lose my voice. I don't want to say anything. Sometimes when I'm feeling uncomfortable, I can't say anything. That's not good for anybody. So our plan for the voice is that when there's something that needs to be said, we'll make a plan. Our plan is, I say to Doug specifically, we need to have a conversation. Now, I've had lots of people go, oh my gosh, if my spouse said conversation, I'd be like, whatever, it doesn't have to be conversation. It can be whatever works for you. Friends of ours, it's meet you in the hot tub, because that's where they can talk. But our voices need to be heard. We need to hear each other.
Yeah, so we need to make a commitment to each other and make a plan proactively. So if I'm ramped up and Barb comes to me and says we need to have a talk or a conversation, that's a flag for me to know that something's not right. Now, we're not going to have that talk right away because I'm probably not going to be able to react very well to that conversation, but we make a time and a place to make sure that happens. So the commitment is there that when Barb says that, I know she has something she has to tell me, and we make sure it happens.
Mm-hmm. The last piece of that voice commitment that we have in our plan is that sometimes if I have to say it, even if it isn't the right time, I commit to saying it.
And I try and accept it. All right.
Whew.
So we do all these things, this plan, we plan this plan, but there is a chance that even this stuff isn't going to work. Mm-hmm. The longer you're on the job, the more buildup of trauma is, the more difficult it is sometimes to deal with it ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Again, it comes and goes. Like I keep saying, the clouds come and go. Sometimes, though, the clouds can get pretty dark. They can get pretty dark. And if those, let's have a conversation, I'm sorry. One moment, please. Thank you. If those strategies that we have in that plan we have isn't working and I get to the point where I have to say something, then things are pretty dark.
But again, this doesn't happen all the time, right?
Nope.
Okay.
Nope, it doesn't. Sometimes the cloud gets dark, and how does that look different? The clouds are more frequent. The clouds are more intense. The clouds are of longer duration. But what you really notice, what I really notice, is that it steals the joy. That is when we're not having a conversation on the front porch. That's when we put it down.
So there's a point where all the things we do together proactively, the way we cope with things, there is a chance that there's going to come a time where that's not enough. And that's when we have to realize that the next step, talking to somebody, is a positive thing. So going to talk to a mental health professional and get some professional help can be very important. And that happened in 2011. Did I have an option there?
Nope.
What'd you say? Okay, no swearing.
There was no swearing. It was dark. You need to talk to somebody. But because we had made that agreement, we had that plan in place, he knew I wasn't kidding. I didn't want to say that. That's uncomfortable. No one wants to feel that way, but it needed to happen. And we had made that commitment to each other.
So when Barb told me to go get help, I did. And it helped. So we can make all these plans and try and help ourselves and help each other. But at some point, you might need to go get help. So it's okay. I think it's okay. It's okay not to be okay. It's okay to be okay. But the communication between each other is the most important thing.
It's kind of why we're standing here. Do you need to hear our journey, our baggage? Maybe not. Maybe not. But it's important because they can go to the hall and do what they do, and they're in responder mode. So it's pretty amazing what they can do when they're in that mode. But at home, things might be different, and it's okay. It's okay. This is my desk, actually. Years ago, I latched onto this quote: "Life isn't about waiting for the storm to pass, but learning to dance in the rain." I didn't know at the time what that really meant, but as things go on, I'm like, oh, this is making more and more sense. The key to our dance is communication.
Megan gave us a quote just the other day. She said, "No way you get through this job normal." I came from my 23-year-old, so she can see it,
Yep.
right? Yep. But the important thing is that we had that conversation, and she told me that. She told us that story. So, no way you get out of this job normal.
So what do we know? It's been 30 years. What do we know? We know it works. We know we can do it because we can do hard things, right? We know that you need to start early. You need to talk often. You need to make and commit to a plan. And you need to share it so that you don't wear it.
Yeah.
Ta-da!
So, our last slide.
Whoop. I should get rid of the cards.
So this is us. It isn't easy.
But it's worth it.
But it's worth it. Thank you.
At this point, we'd like to ask Todd Chinnick to come up and say a few words. Podium? This works. Let's switch.
That's awesome that I get to follow that. Thanks. What a great presentation. So, thank you very much. So just to start, good evening. My name is Todd Chinnick. If you don't know me, or if you haven't met me yet, I'm actually up here now, just to recognize the impact that Doug Sharp has had on mental health in the Kitchener Fire Department. For the past 12 years, I've been a member of the peer support team here in Kitchener with Doug, and I've seen firsthand the difference he has made in the lives of firefighters, their families, and their friends. As leader of our peer team, Doug has been instrumental in shaping the program in Kitchener. One of the biggest things I've been able to take away from Doug is that he's never sat back, that good was never good enough because he wanted the best, and he was always trying to find ways to improve. Whether it was bringing new ideas or projects to the team, educating or training who would listen, fighting for bigger budgets or better benefits, searching for better professional care or more of them. His proactive approach to mental health has advanced how the team operates. We have an emphasis on prevention, catching things early, and building resiliency. In his commitment to improving mental health, he's represented the Kitchener Fire Department, but not only them, he's represented the entire fire service in breaking down barriers and stigmas that go with the job. His actions are the reason we have seen improvement in mental illness, or how mental illness is viewed in the fire stations. He's made it okay to not be okay. He's made it okay to seek help. He's made it okay to be open. And he's the reason why we have more conversations about mental health in our fire stations now. Barb, it's fitting that you're here tonight with Doug, because it gives us a chance to thank you and acknowledge the support and sacrifice that you and your family have made. We all know how important support at home is, and especially after listening to what you guys just said. So for all the times that Doug was away helping one of us, we realized that was time taken away from you and your family. We can't thank you enough for that. Doug, it would be impossible to gauge and measure how much of an impact and effect you've had at the Kitchener Fire Department. Our next generations are going to benefit from the impression you have left. We will grow from the foundation that you have built and the standard you have set. Your influence will continue to be felt over time as waves of future firefighters pick up the torch that you have carried. So on behalf of the peer support team, past and present, and from the entire Kitchener Fire Department membership, it's my honor to say thank you to you and Barb, and we do have a token of appreciation for you that we'd like to present.
Okay, thank you, Doug and Barb. I know that was really tough for you guys, and we do truly appreciate everything you guys have contributed. So thank you. Along with our speakers today, you might have seen, did I get up? Sorry. Some of the different support organizations around the back of the room. We've offered them up just a quick opportunity to come up, kind of give a little spiel, let you know who they are and what they do, so that you can possibly use their resources in the future. So first we just have a Badge for Life, followed by Invisible Wounds. If you guys want to come up just for a quick sec, and then we'll get to a break after that, I think. Yes, no, maybe?
Welcome, everyone. So my name is Laura Kloosterman. I'm a retired police officer, and I'm now the Executive Director for Badge of Life Canada. Let me first say thank you to Kitchener Fire Department for being so proactive in the mental well-being. I'd also like to take the opportunity to thank each and every one of you here for being champions of being proactive in your mental well-being, all of you. We are not going to change the culture. We're going to create new culture, and that's exactly what you're doing right here, by modeling the behavior and being proactive in your mental well-being. Badge of Life Canada is a charitable organization that empowers Canadian public safety personnel and their families through education and peer support. Check out our website, grab some swag in the back, because everything on our website is peer-reviewed, education-based, and we have our peer support sessions. We have a weekly peer support session that is facilitated every week by a mental health professional. So there is a psychoeducation piece to every one of our peer support sessions on Monday evening. So check out, get some swag. I know I always laugh whenever I do like a police officer thing, the first thing they do is grab swag and then they sit down. When I do paramedics, they're kind of like, maybe I'll get some stuff. When I do fire, they're like, no, I don't think I'm gonna take anything. So it's always so much fun to watch the dynamics of the first ones, and then corrections, they just take everything. Like they just clean the place out. So please come back, have a look, and grab some stuff. And thank you very, very much for the invitation. And thank you very much for being champions and creating the new culture, because that's how we're going to end the stigma. Take care. Thank you.
So much for having me tonight, and co-presenting with me is Deborah McDonald from Invisible Wounds. My name is Jen Welsh. I am also a retired police officer, and I actually, back in the day, worked with Laura in Aurelia for the OPP. Really happy to be here tonight. Wanted to share a little bit about Dalton Associates. That is who I am now working with. I am the program manager for Encompass, which is a mental health and wellness navigation program for OPP members. And I also am the program manager for First Responder, our First Responder program. Just wanted to share with you a little bit about the organization and how we power these programs. So these are some pieces with how we power them. We have secure virtual clinics, services offered in 25 different languages. We have a vetted clinician list. One of the speakers earlier this evening mentioned the importance of having clinicians who understand first responder work, and that is so important. We also offer customized mental health programs, and these are some of the offerings we have. I heard earlier you speaking about Chief Martin. We have partnered with Brampton Fire as well and power a program for Brampton Fire Service. So I just wanted to share a little bit about Dalton Associates. We also have some information at the back. Please come and chat with us, and glad to answer any questions.
I told you that's why I have IT. I don't do this stuff. Hi, my name's Deborah, as I said, and thank you for the intro. Just very quickly, just to let you know that Invisible Wounds was founded in 2015. We're not a charity, we're not for profit, we're just a bunch of folks that got together. We're like-minded, that's what I always say. Our goal is to promote and support the mental wellness amongst first responders, and initially it was first responders, but now we've branched out to family members also. And got to mention, of course, Doug's been involved with us for a number of years, and Barb also has done presentations, and they're going to do it again. Okay, and then quickly. Yeah, so like I said, we're like-minded persons. Most of us have lived experience, so we kind of get it. We host the workshops, seminars, conferences, started on a municipal, then a provincial, and now national basis. And we really promote collaboration amongst organizations. This is going to be one of the key things that we're going to be pushing this year, because we've got a lot of silos going on, and we think it'd be really nice if we could all play in the same sandbox, and really focus on what's for the common good of all our first responders and their families. And I think there's one more. There you go. Okay, and this is our future event. So the national is going to be in Niagara, and it's October 3rd and 4th. And it's not for families, sorry about that, guys. You can come and hang out if you want, but the conference actually is just for first responders. And we've got some folks coming from Edmonton and hopefully from the East Coast once again to do presentations, as well as some folks from Ontario. And then last year we did a mental wellness retreat. We went to the Dominican. There was just 10 of us, first time out. It was a blast. But we also had Christina Harrington, Dr. Christina Harrington. She did a educational workshop to kind of legitimized everybody going. So yeah, and so we're going to do it again, God willing, and don't know when, and it'll be February, but so if you want to save some pennies for that, that'd be great. Just 2 extra things I wanted to mention because, yeah, very important, the fact that you talked about families and kids. 2 books. Dr. Susan Hunt, she's been supporting Invisible Wounds for a number of years. She sends us some books, and I think we sell them. Yeah, so she's going to do that again. There's a hero in our family, and she's now co-authored another. Oh, there you go. You got all of them? Oh, good for you. You have the books here, leave them on the table if you want to look at them. Cool, thank you. Do you have Nick's too? Okay, fine. So Nick Helmsley, he's going to be presenting at the seminar. He's a firefighter, then went back to school, got an education, does some counseling. Going to go back to doing firefighting. And so his book is After the Call. And once again, it's talking about family, about communication, and the importance of it. That's it. Thank you for your time. Great to see you out tonight.
Brian, did you want to come up and do your talk for Frontline Forward now as well? Sorry to blindside you here. Oh, yes. So at the Invisible Wounds table, Deb is going to be running a raffle of sorts. So during our intermission, which is coming right up after Brian, make sure you swing by all the tables. But if you go to the Invisible Wounds table, they're going to have a draw for some sort of prize later on.
Good evening, everybody. I'm Brian Stevens. I'm the proud owner, founder, and creator of Frontline Forward. If you haven't heard of us, check out our website at www.frontlineforward.com. But the nuts and bolts of it is we're a fully functional, multidisciplinary wellness center with a key focus on supporting our first responders and their family members. We have a pretty outstanding fitness center that's accessible 24/7, and we have the best physiotherapy clinic in MPT. Blake Scott's at the back of the room to answer any questions with that. But we have a number of different other options. We have yoga classes, Pilates, meditation. We also have massage therapy, psychotherapy. I have 2 trauma counselors on staff. And we also have fascial stretch therapy, medical acupuncture. We're doing a good service. We just want to reach out to all of you and say, come by, check us out. You won't be disappointed. Thanks.
Okay, so we're going to take a brief intermission now. We're going to take about 15 minutes, mingle, hit all the tables, grab the swag, as Laura said, get yourself a coffee or a snack. I'd also like to point out and say thank you to Wounded Warriors. Gord is back there at the Wounded Warriors table, and we have Tom and Jackie at the Boots on the Ground table. And we also have Front Door on the far side of the room here, who will also be doing a presentation after the break. So 15 minutes, and then we'll get back at it.
Okay. So before we get to our next speaker, I just want to bring your attention a couple resources that we've developed in-house. Our union website, kitchenerfirefighters.ca. Up on the top there, you can see there's a little tab, CIS Info. Our union, Jeff Johnson, secretary, he's done a great job at kind of reorganizing this website, making it a lot more user-friendly and adding some resources in for us. So on this site, there's a list of our CIS team members, and if you go down a bit, there's also a link there which notifies our response team. It's been more of an officer role or responsibility, but you can contact the CIS team through that link. Also has a whole ton of resources that you can guide yourself through. A lot of the support groups that are here tonight are there, along with a whole bunch more information at the bottom. So check it out. To make it easy to access that information, we've made up these fancy locker/fridge magnets on there. There's a little code. You can just scan that. It'll take you right to this website. There's some on your table, so take them home, put them someplace accessible. Our team will be around to the halls to pass them out to the firefighters. You can put them up in your locker at the station and keep it accessible. We also have, if you're not aware, on the back of each fire station officer or the office door, we have these resource packets that you can grab pretty easily. In there, again, is a whole bunch of information on how to access our team, support resources. There's that code again to get you to that site, which has all our resources on it. Trying to make it as easy as possible for access of information if you ever need it. So our next speaker, we have Kevin Capobianco. Kevin is speaking on behalf of Breakwater Institute, and he will speak from a clinician's point of view. Touching on more of the treatment side of things, he'll cover what Breakwater has to offer, what treatment could look like, various modalities of treatment, and so on. Please join me in welcoming Kevin.
Wow. Been very excited to be here for the evening, and it's just lovely to see so many folks coming out to learn, talk, and continue to move forward in making mental health a priority for first responders. As another kind of step in introducing myself, I am a recently minted clinical psychologist who is working at Breakwater Institute. I graduated from the University of Waterloo in September, finishing up my PhD, and have been working at Breakwater for 3 years with first responders, including fire, police, paramedics, as well as working with veterans and also family members of those groups. I feel like I'm still learning, but have some hopefully useful information to share with you today about operational stress injuries and what treatment can look like for them. So the old overview here is I'm going to start talking just a little bit about operational stress injuries, trauma, and to define those from a clinician's perspective a little bit for you. Hopefully that will be useful as little flags to kind of keep in mind for your own mental health awareness. Next, I'm going to discuss the different mental health professionals who are out there who can be tapped to overcome some work-related, trauma-related mental health difficulties, and then finally talk more specifically about psychotherapy and how psychologists might help support someone's recovery from trauma with different therapy modalities and different approaches. I also am hoping to have some time to sneak in at the very end some useful takeaways that you might be able to use even on your own, little tools, tidbits of information that might be kind of worth sticking in your head that you can use on your own. So, operational stress injuries are pretty typically thought of probably as PTSD, but there are other types of mental health difficulties that can arise from workplace exposure to trauma. And the key feature is when you are working in the face of trauma, the impact of that results in sort of functional changes, changes at home, a set of symptoms that arise that are noticeable and impairing. And that would be this very broad definition of an operational stress injury. This can include depression, substance use issues, or again, that kind of really typical example of PTSD, which we're going to go in and define a bit more closely in just a couple minutes. I think it's also worth defining trauma a bit more. Sometimes it's used pretty loosely in the public sphere. So someone might say, it was very traumatic when I forgot that I was supposed to pick up my best friend from the airport. But I think everyone here probably recognizes that use of trauma doesn't really do justice to the fact that sometimes you're exposed to pretty difficult things that can have a dramatic shift on how you look at the world, how your body is acting, how you're able to behave and cope. And so there's a more clinical definition of trauma, which includes being exposed to violence, a life-threatening situation, a threat of serious injury. And that exposure doesn't just have to be that you directly experience that yourself. There's vicarious trauma, where you have come across someone else experiencing that, maybe a friend or a close family member, or also that through work you come across details of traumatic situations repeatedly. That can have a pretty significant impact as well and be just as impactful in the long run as directly experiencing a traumatic situation yourselves. And then also there's that fact that in firework you might come across dangerous situations yourself. It's very common for folks to have a temporary reaction after being exposed to trauma, and I think that's worth recognizing. If someone faces a traumatic situation, you might have some sleepless nights, you might have a lot of anxiety during the day, your mood might drop, and that's actually quite normal. Usually, though, things start to improve, and the timeline for that could be a couple days, get a couple nights sleep, a couple days away from your block of shifts, or maybe it's a couple weeks. We start to wonder if it's worth reaching out for support and help if those sorts of reactions seem to be lasting a month or longer, maybe between a month or 3 months. That really suggests that maybe someone is getting kind of stuck in bouncing back from being exposed to trauma. It's also true that in first responder work, one trauma is probably not so easy to pinpoint as the cause of a shift, the cause of an operational stress injury. There's also a cumulative impact over time from responding to things repeatedly. And so it might be hard to point exactly to that was the one that did it. It might be a gradual buildup of symptoms, which can be harder to see too, harder to recognize the trajectory is kind of moving in a negative direction. Or it might be the case of something kind of like the straw that broke the camel's back. I was holding it together just well enough, then I came across this one call, and it sort of tipped things over the edge for me. I wasn't able to cope so well anymore. So this is a cluster of related difficulties that I think can stem from trauma, and this is kind of a demonstration that the types of things that can be called an operational stress injury. So depression, low mood, feeling uninterested in things, maybe feelings of worthlessness, guilt, withdrawing from things that you used to find enjoyable. Again, we'll come back to PTSD in a second. But then there's a couple other things that might be more warning signs that you're on the trajectory towards something that clinicians might diagnose. So they're a bit more loosely used terms, but they're still worth attending to. When someone is just feeling exhausted consistently, or if someone is finding that they're burnt out, their passion for the job is flagging, they aren't really able to give the same energy and investment to work that they used to be able to, that idea of burnout, or compassion fatigue, when you're just not feeling like you can really care about the things you're coming across at work anymore for the people that you're usually, or in the past, feeling motivated to help. That giving and giving and giving until you can't give anymore, that compassion fatigue. Those are all other signs that maybe something is stewing, and maybe it's worth thinking about getting some support or help now before it progresses further. PTSD, though, is the most stereotypical kind of idea of a trauma-related operational stress injury. And I wanted to cover what the 4 clinical symptom areas are and kind of give a bit of background on what we think is going on with these different symptom areas. The first symptom area is re-experiencing. So after coming across traumatic situations, they are continuing to show up in your life, even after the event is done and over. This could be through memories that pop into your head in an unwanted, distressing way. It could also be through dreams that sort of relate to work or work stresses or traumas. It doesn't have to be an exact situation. Sometimes it can just have the sort of flavor. Or it can be through a reaction when you're reminded either by a situation, a conversation, a place, an object, a news story. That can also trigger a strong emotional response or a physical sensation, kind of returning to a fight or flight mode. Those are all what we'd call these re-experiencing symptoms. The next set of symptoms is avoidance symptoms. So we heard, I think, a little bit in Doug and Barb's conversation earlier about avoiding feelings, avoiding connecting with people, withdrawing. That is definitely one form of avoidance that we see. There's also avoidance of memories, thoughts about work, thoughts about any of the traumatic things, trying to suppress those, not bring them to mind. The crappy thing is that often when we try to not think about things is when it pops up even more. But it's kind of natural. We withdraw from things that feel kind of yucky and bad to us. That is pretty often response to unpleasant things. Avoidance can be difficult to break out of, but in a little while I'll talk about some steps people can take to start re-engaging with things, because one of the other consequences of avoidance over time is that it tends to grow. If I avoid this thing that was a trigger, that might feel good right now, but then this other thing that's kind of similar to that I'm going to also start avoiding, and the world can sort of shrink, and you might have less opportunity to engage in things that you used to like to do, go places that were meaningful to you, and sometimes even feel pretty restricted to just a couple safe feeling places in your life. Negative shifts in mood and beliefs is a pretty, to me, central set of symptoms for PTSD. A lot of the folks I've worked with don't just describe the calls they've gone to as difficult because they saw someone who was hurt or saw some gory stuff. It's the suffering that is often the hardest. Seeing people at their worst, in the worst moment of their lives, or family members who are worried and hurt as well. And when someone is exposed to that repeatedly, their view of the world might start to change. I used to think that the world was a great place to go into and I'd have adventures and fun, but now it seems darker, maybe risky and unsafe. Other shifts that can come from that might be shifts about someone's view of themselves. I used to think I was competent or strong or capable or moral or something, but facing a certain trauma has made me question that. Now I don't feel so good about myself. There's also just the mood shifts that can come in this symptom cluster. So people feeling persistently irritable, depressed, angry. And those, I think, pretty closely tie to these shifts in how we look at the world. And that's kind of the core of CBT, which I'll get to in a little bit too. Then there's also feeling detached, alienated, distant from people, from society. And that shift can be pretty isolating. There's also the fourth cluster here, which is hyperarousal symptoms, which has nothing to do with libido. This is a set of symptoms that is really just meant to reflect that after going through so many intense situations, your body is probably more ready to go into a fight or flight mode and maybe have difficulty coming down from that. You stay in this heightened state of readiness. And what's tough about that is sometimes it's good to be relaxed. It's sometimes good because we need to fall asleep, or we need to let our body come down from the cortisol and adrenaline. But being stuck in that hyperaroused state can get in the way of that. And then over time, our body starts to get exhausted in that state, and we have trouble concentrating, have trouble planning, have trouble sleep. And when you're in that fight or flight mode as well, it changes how you look at the world, how the things that you're noticing, and you might become pretty keen at picking out anything that could be a little bit dangerous, or your body might be ready to startle easily and get ready to fight or flee if you need to. So these are the symptoms of PTSD. What you don't need, though, is to have all of these to eventually reach a diagnosis of PTSD, and that can be a bit confusing for folks. They might know so-and-so who had a diagnosis and had this symptom, but I don't. You usually just need a couple of symptoms in each area for it to last a little bit of time and also for it to be having an impact on you and your ability to enjoy life, function, and feel good day to day. So that's my little overview of operational stress injuries and trauma. And now maybe we can talk about what I hope will be a hopeful set of ideas here about how people can recover and move through those impacts. So broadly, there's several options, and they're not mutually exclusive. Sometimes it takes a combination to help someone recover. The first is medication that I wanted to talk about. So typically, people can reach out to a family doctor, sometimes be referred to a psychiatrist, or sometimes a nurse practitioner who can prescribe medications, and different medications can have different benefits and address different symptom areas. So there's some medications that help with mood, if you're feeling low, down all the time, some that help with anxiety, there's some that help with sleep, and some that can even help with nightmares or difficult dreams. One of the good things about medication is, as long as you can kind of remain consistent in taking it, once you have them handy, there's hopefully just going to be a benefit that you see in a few weeks without too much extra stuff that you need to be doing. One of the downsides, though, is that there can be some side effects for folks, and often those show up just a bit before the actual benefits. So that can be a bit of a tough period. Another thing that can be a bit difficult about medications for some folks is that it can take a little bit of time to find the right one. Sometimes folks have to trial a few different types of medications in order to find one that's really fitting and helping them and benefiting them. So that can get a bit discouraging sometimes. Not being a psychiatrist, psychologists can't do that, so I can't talk too much about that. So let's talk a little bit about self-help resources. So I thought it was interesting to hear that there's some resources you might have access to, apps, websites that are self-help, and those are something that could be interesting to explore. There's also books, workbooks, websites. I have a few resources I'm going to list at the end of the presentation here. The thing that can be a bit hard about self-help resources is that you usually need a bit of gas left in your tank in order to really invest in them, stick consistent with them, learn the material, apply it yourself. But for some folks, that might be a good fit. There's also peer support. Obviously, I think being here tonight, everyone hopefully is on board with that idea that peer support can be very useful. It's obviously a wonderful thing to be able to maybe connect with folks who know what you're going through because they've been there or they know the job. So I don't hope I have to sell that anymore. But psychotherapy is probably where I'm going to talk the most tonight. Starting with the idea of who can provide psychotherapy in Ontario, because it can be a bit confusing. There are several different professionals who can provide psychotherapy, and the one I listed here, the first is psychiatrists. It is actually still pretty rare nowadays to find psychiatrists who provide psychotherapy. Most of their work is towards medications to manage mental health difficulties, but there are some who I think still will meet with folks for therapy. But the other groups here are probably the ones that are more relevant. So there's social workers and occupational therapists who can provide psychotherapy. They usually have master's degrees in their respective fields, and social workers can be very helpful in also knowing a lot of community resources, helping people navigate systems and advocate for their needs, even beyond psychotherapy. And occupational therapists, from my kind of work so far, one of their really big focuses is helping people find improvements in their kind of daily activities if mental health has sort of been impacting their ability to shop, get stuff done around the house, engage in recreational activities. That's kind of their big focus, or helping folks return to work successfully. Registered psychotherapists have a variety of educational backgrounds and are a relatively recent group in Ontario. So there's a lot of diversity in their approaches and services that they offer, and also in their educational background that they bring to the table. And finally, psychologists, probably the group I know most about, theoretically being one. Psychologists have university degrees in clinical psychology usually. Often it's a doctoral degree which involves completing some research, clinical training, practica and residency, and learning how to treat and assess mental health difficulties. Psychologists and psychiatrists and family physicians and nurse practitioners are typically the groups that can diagnose mental health problems and also provide documentation in support of things like accommodations at work or time off work if needed. So that's a little bit of a distinction between these groups worth recognizing. So after talking a little bit about the different providers of psychotherapy, what the heck is psychotherapy? There are a lot of different approaches, so there's diversity here too, and I'm going to cover a few of the specific forms of therapy that are often used to treat operational stress injuries and PTSD in particular. But before diving into that, I think there's a few really important points, broadly speaking, about what makes psychotherapy effective. First, I think that it's very important in the research we bear this out too, for there to be a sense of a good fit between the client and the therapist. There should be some agreement between what the goals of the treatment are from the client and the therapist. There should be mutual respect, and should be a sense of being cared about, trusting the treatment provider. These are kind of the bedrock of good therapy in my mind. That safe space, accepting, supportive, collaborative relationship. Some folks might want something a bit different in their therapist. They might prefer someone who's a bit more direct, who gives them a bit more stuff to do between sessions, or who's a bit more structured in their approach, while other people might want the opposite of all those things. So it could also be a matter of shopping around for a therapist who's a good fit for you, or, and this can be a bit difficult, sharing with your therapist that what you're doing right now isn't really working, can you switch it up a little? And I think a good therapist should be responsive to that and willing to try and adjust to meet your needs. The client also matters too in therapy. A lot of medical professions involve, here's what to do, go do it, we'll check in a few weeks, and your 20 minutes are up. In a psychotherapy course, it's a lot more on the client to make the ideas and things discussed happen. You're a more active participant, and instead of a therapist giving you the exact answers on what to do, you'll be exploring together what are good fits and good options, and hopefully they bring the expertise, but you'll have to bring what will fit with your life and what you're out for doing. So it's kind of that more collaborative thing coming in again. Therapy can last different lengths. Again, some other broader points about therapy. Sometimes it's a matter of months, sometimes it can be years. Sometimes it is weekly, that's probably the most typical. But as people improve, or maybe if they come in when things aren't so severe, it can be spaced out a bit more, every other week, once a month, check-ins a couple times a year. The typical flow of therapy also, I think, varies a bit between different providers, but probably a good bet would be to spend a few sessions just getting to know the therapist, talk to them a little bit about yourself, the problems you're facing, what you want to work on. You might get to know them a little bit, and then you might move into a more active kind of treatment phase after that. So it could be a few sessions of just assessment and getting to know each other before digging in. But hopefully within a handful of sessions, 10 sessions, you kind of know whether this is kind of on the right path for you. And if not, it might be worth having that conversation that something's not fitting, or thinking about switching to a different therapist. Later in therapy, the focus might shift to how to help you take the tools you learned and keep using them on your own to maintain the gains. And then there might even be the option for some booster sessions later after you've kind of wrapped up the main part. See in 6 months, see how things are going. If it's good, we'll call it. If you need a bit more work to help hone things again, we'll need a bit more. So that's kind of a typical trajectory too. Specific forms of therapy now. So the idea of CBT has already been talked about a little bit here today, but how about I drill into that a bit more and explain it in a bit more detail. Cognitive behavioral therapy really focuses, on these 4 things. There is an interaction between how we're thinking about things in our life, how we're acting, how our body's feeling, and then the emotional experiences that we're having. And what I often tell folks is, to just tell you, stop being sad, and for that to work, doesn't seem to though. So instead, we try to help people make changes in the other areas. Is there something that you're thinking about in a way that is actually adding to the difficulty you're facing? And could we explore whether there's another perspective here that would be realistic but helpful? Or with the idea of avoidance, is that helping? It's like having better than what you've avoided? Maybe not. Maybe we can help you break out of that and start reconnecting with things, reconnecting with your feelings, acting differently, and see if that helps. And with your body, are you tense all the time? Are you feeling short of breath? Are you hyperventilating a little bit? What if we help you practice some ways of soothing your body, calming your body, and see if that also helps? But cognitive behavioral therapy is just one approach. It is probably the most well-researched for treating mental health difficulties, but it's not the only one. Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy is another approach to treating trauma that is pretty popular. It's out there, and a lot of people seem to respond well to it. I don't know too much about it, but the idea behind it is, typically you would recount some of the difficult experiences you've had while doing something that stimulates the left and right side of your body repeatedly. And the theory there is that it tones down the emotional intensity of what you're talking about so you can share it, and then it might be less impactful. So there's some exposing yourself to the stories and the experiences you've had while doing this bilateral stimulation, or eye movement, left, right, left, right. Other therapy approaches that seem to be gaining some traction. One of them is called acceptance and commitment therapy. It includes being mindful so that you're more in tune with what's going on right now, accepting the present moment, accepting what you're feeling. Practicing an attitude of, this is what I'm going through, efforts to avoid it or change it won't be helpful, so I'll just accept that. And then focusing on recommitting and finding ways of living in accordance with your values. And I find it a really neat approach because it says you might have feelings and thoughts that are going on right now that are very hard, but instead of just trying to fight against them, why don't we just focus on accepting them, letting them just be things that are going on right now, but finding ways to live a meaningful and happy life. There's some less commonly used therapy approaches in the kind of realm of OSI that I think are still bona fide evidence-based treatments for other difficulties, but could be used here. So psychodynamic, it's pretty older focused therapy, but there's still a lot of clinicians who use it now, finding unconscious patterns in your life, talking about them, exploring them, and helping you kind of gain self-awareness that way, do different things in your life. Dialectical behavioral therapy, which is kind of an offshoot of CBT that really is focused on helping people cope with strong emotions. And some therapists will do an integration of these different therapy approaches. So some people might describe themselves as integrative. I use a bit of CBT, I use a bit of that, I use a bit of this, and I try to pull it together to match the needs of my client. So, the next bit here could help illustrate a couple specific CBT tools in a bit more detail that you can use on your own. And I think are also hopefully going to be some broader level skills and ideas that could be helpful for you folks. So stress management techniques are often talked about in therapy. Mindfulness, guided visualizations, deep breathing, progressive muscle relaxation. These are all ways of tuning into the present moment, getting out of sort of do mode, just relax yourself a bit. Yoga, walking in nature, those are things we're already talking about today too. I think that's interesting. And you can kind of see how this might focus on that sort of hyper-arousal cluster of symptoms. You can calm your body a bit. That might sort of address some of those. So when we talk with folks about maybe making some changes to try and incorporate these in their life a bit more, we usually suggest start small. If you want to learn a little bit about one of these things, Google it, see if there's a way you can incorporate it into one of your days next week for 5 minutes. And if it's doing nothing for you, try something else. But you might want to give it a few shots and see if it could have a benefit before abandoning it completely. This is probably one of the core CBT tools. This is a kind of summary of this idea of what we call thought challenging. When someone is being faced with trauma and it changes their view of the world, going through a process like this where you notice that there's a thought you've had that's very extreme, catastrophizing might be an example. Everything's going terrible. Catch that thought. Explore what reason you have to believe it and reasons that it might not be completely true, and see if you can generate a more useful, balanced perspective. I might drop my computer today. It's not for sure, but it could happen. And then practice living with that new thought as if it was real. And by catching these unhelpful thoughts and trying to shift them a little bit, then you might feel a bit more relaxed, or feel less anxious, feel less angry, and be able to hopefully see those sorts of symptoms come down. This is an illustration of avoidance. That's how we see it in clinical psychology. You're in a situation that you don't like, feel bad, so you leave. That feels good, but that also reinforces that was a situation that you should avoid. You better pay attention next time you're near like that, because it'll make you feel bad and you have to get ready to leave. And it's going to be a self-perpetuating cycle. A way to break out of that is to set small targets to stay in the situation that you want to avoid just a little longer than you usually would. Can I keep myself there for another minute? And then another 5 minutes next week? Or maybe it's about trying to gradually face more difficult situations for you. And the idea there is that over time you get kind of used to each of these. Maybe by visiting the mall the first time you're a bit anxious, but by the 10th time it's actually kind of boring. So you move up this step in difficulty, and you can see that things begin to shift and you feel a bit better, a little less restricted in what you can do, a bit more confident in your ability to tackle challenges and triggers. Communication. This is a very brief tool that's sometimes folks find helpful for setting boundaries with others, because when you're in a high-stress job and then you go home and there's other obligations there, it might be difficult to take the time for self-care. And this is a way of sort of describing and navigating your needs to someone in a clear way that hopefully they can hear, and then you get a bit of a balance in what you need versus what the demands are on you. So describe the situation, what you're asking for, express your feelings and needs, assert why you can't do what's asked or why you need what you're asking for. If the other person's kind of agreeable to that, thank them so they know this is a good thing they should do next time. Please listen to me when I have a need. Be mindful. So instead of letting your mind get scattered or intensify the situation, try to stay present, try to appear confident because your needs are important, and be willing to negotiate a little if you need to. Other protective factors that are sort of just in general, I think, helpful for folks navigating stress at work, trauma, exercising, sleep, getting social support, trying to find meaning and belonging also outside of the workplace can be helpful too, things that matter to you and feel like rewarding in other areas of your life. Self-pacing and practicing other positive emotional regulation skills, kind of those stress management techniques. Yeah, so I think that's it for my presentation. Thank you all for listening. There's some resources here that you could look at some point to expand on some of the ideas I've talked about. I've got some printouts that have these resources listed on them on the table beside the badge of life over there. And feel free to grab those if you'd like, or take pictures, or whatever. Hopefully that's been a little bit of a helpful overview for you all. Thank you. Fact
Please join me in welcoming Jenny and Liz to the front door.
I'll stand to the side of the podium so you can see me. So I'm Liz Fonseca, and this is my coworker Jenny Jackson, and we work for Lutherwood. Front Door is one of the programs available through Lutherwood. I will present a little bit about what Front Door is, how to access it, and Jenny will share some information about child and parent wellness, some strategies. And we just want to thank you all for, first of all, being here and having us here. Already we've heard about the impact on the family, and yes, we'll be focusing on children, but also caregivers and parents. So know that services are not just for children, it's for the parents and caregivers as well. Okay, so, oh no, I can't see it. Okay, so we're going to talk about, we're going to provide information about Front Door, how to access our services, provide a brief overview of attachment and parent and child wellness using the attachment and trauma lens, and Jenny's going to talk about that part. I think this will be okay. So Front Door, again, we work for Lutherwood. Front Door is one of the Lutherwood programs, and we call it the Access to Child and Youth Mental Health Services because for anyone in Waterloo region, if it's yourself or neighbors or friends or family, if there's something going on and you're not sure what to do, call Front Door. We try our very best to make sure to connect you to the services that may be a fit for you. And if it's something that maybe isn't offered through Lutherwood or one of our partners, then we try to connect you to what's available in the community. So when a child or youth is experiencing mental health, and we'd say parents and caregivers as well, emotional or behavioral challenges, Front Door is the first place to go for information, assistance, and access to services. Front Door offers families with children and youth 0 to 18, a safe, confidential environment where you can tell us your concerns and get support to take the next steps towards wellness. Our trained staff know about the challenges young people may be dealing with, the stress of family experiences when a child or teen is struggling with mental health, and we know about the different services that are available. And I do want to stress, so I'm one of the service coordinators, and sometimes I'm working primarily with parents and caregivers. We know kids, when they get to a certain age, if they don't want to talk, you can't make them. However, there's still supports and services available to parents and caregivers. So the various ways to get a hold of us, you can contact us, check out our website, frontdoormentalhealth.com. We're on Facebook. You can email us at familycompass@lutherwood.ca or call. So the phone number, 519-749-2932. If you don't know where else to go, what to do, call the number, and then the person who answers will try their very best to connect you to where you need to be. So, what happens when you contact Front Door? So, some of the most common ways that we help. We can connect to parent support and coaching, skill building for caregivers and youth. We can help with emotion regulation, reducing severity of mental health challenges, increasing coping skills and well-being, connect to community resource linkages and advocacy. And just to clarify, this isn't happening necessarily when you call into Front Door. It's we can connect you to services and supports that can help with these.
Okay, thanks, Liz. So I'm going to talk a little bit about, how we approach treatment and some of how the skills we use, the foundational skills that we use to sort of help parents and children in the journey through treatment. And like Liz said, I'm going to let you do that for me, Liz. Like Liz said, some of the service support that you might receive when you call into the front door isn't necessarily where you're going to land as far as a program or an intervention. I'll also say that the front door is really sort of what would be the most intensive types of treatment services that are available for young people and their families. From a child and youth mental health perspective in Waterloo Region, we are core funded from the Ministry of Health, so there's no fee for any of the programs, but with that comes, unfortunately, some wait times and some service pressures in our current context. So I wanted to just be able to talk a little bit about, how we're approaching the work and how this affects caregiver wellness and sort of the parallel that exists between the wellness that we've heard about tonight for you and your children. And so really, we use attachment-based care. We think about needs from an attachment perspective, and what that means is that's really that foundational relationship that children have with their caregivers, the security that's offered there, and like we heard earlier, some of the brain-based impacts that the connection and the relationship can have on the development for a young person. So with that attachment understanding comes the notion that all behavior has meaning, and all of us are really seeking to behave in ways that allow our needs to get met. And so how do we understand this for children, and how do we support them on their wellness journey? Really what's at the heart of understanding attachment and relationships is empathy and the skill of being able to empathize. And that's not just for being able to give empathy, that's being able to apply that for yourself. And as a caregiver, as a parent, it's really critical to think about compassion for yourself, compassion for your experience. I'm a parent, so I can tell you it's one of the hardest jobs, lowest paid, that you could possibly do. And it just requires a tremendous amount of emotional resource. So that real ability to sit with, compassion for yourself and that empathy for you first is very critical in being able then to turn towards your child, or anyone for that matter, and offer them empathy. And I think there's a couple things I like to remind people about empathy. One is that it's not agreeing with a behavior. With parents, sometimes there can be a little bit of a barrier around empathy because there's a permission giving if I empathize with you. It's not about that. It's I see you, I value your experience, and empathy doesn't mean that I'm not going to have boundaries, there's not going to be implications for particular behaviors, because that's another skill as a parent, that you need to have limits and boundaries. But empathy says I see you and I care about what you're experiencing. It really is the foundation of being able to connect with young people and with anyone for that matter. The other thing that's really key, I think, to understanding child and youth mental health is that it's all about the relationship that adults have with young people. And for adults, it's really key that you're initiating that relationship and really in the driver's seat on that connection and that seeking out of that support for your young person. What I'm going to say as well is that empathy and those skills that surround relationships really are the foundation for developing emotion regulation skills. When we think about the attachment and the relationship a caregiver has with their child, that is the first place that the child's going to look for some of those needs to get met, for survival to happen in the first couple years of life. And that attachment relationship really does provide the foundation to developing emotion regulation skills, to having an awareness of what's happening, and to being able to calm and soothe and problem solve through the challenges that life can throw at us. So, what is made up of emotion regulation really is sort of two facets. One is the emotion management side. What am I feeling? Why am I feeling that? And then the other part really is that how am I going to deal with this, and that problem-solving piece. Curiosity is such an essential skill when it comes to dealing with ours and our children's emotions, to be able to pause and reflect and stay very curious. Once we can sort of work through that regulating process and get grounded in ourselves, then we can work on figuring out what to do about that. And when we talk with caregivers about emotion regulation, it really is about learning how to do those two skills, which are different. So when we go back to that brain-based understanding of some of the attachment. And as the last speaker talked about, there's a lot of neuroscience at play here too when we think about emotion regulation, when we think about grounding skills, when we think about working in a high stress environment like you do. When we're in that hyper aroused state more than the average folks, we're going to get more activated by stress and have a lower tolerance in some ways. That window of tolerance can get much smaller when we've had a lot of trauma. And so that work to get grounded, that work to get regulated and to manage through that experience is really key to them being able to build on some problem solving. And so, how do we develop the ability to model some of these things for our children and really to apply these skills to ourselves? That's really, a key takeaway here is that modeling factor. Another key takeaway with the emotion management and the executive functioning is the impact that different things have on your abilities when it comes to these two skill sets. So certainly, as I referenced, having experienced trauma, that's going to change things for you when it comes to some of that regulatory skill set and that being able to manage things that are happening, as well as things like mental health conditions, sensory processing. There's lots of different things that can complicate emotion regulation. I even tend to think that we're living in a pretty complicated world now with technology and globalization and the overstimulation that we're sort of all facing. That stress is higher for people, and that therefore I think it's a lot more work to get regulated, to focus on coping, to focus on calming. And it's not just a generalist skill that children and adults learn in life. I think it's an important skill to really harness and to focus on with intention. This next one was just more of a tool, as we've been talking a bit about the neuroscience, right? And so really the neuroscience is that when your brain gets hijacked by stress, it's going to go into that reptilian part of your brain, which is in the back part, the limbic system, and it's going to do one of four things, right? Fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. And we teach this skill to kids and families where we use our hand to describe what's happening in the brain when we get stressed. And so, the hand-brain model, I think, is just an important tool for people to have to understand that when you're in that aroused state, there's a biochemical change happening in your brain. If you've been under stress for an extended period of time, some of those chemicals can be, releasing and can be toxic for the brain in and of itself. But I think for kids, showing them what we call the flipping your lid. So I teach my kids quite often when they get upset. They get upset quite often. They're 7, so, a lot of things upset them, but I try to help them remember, you flipped your lid, right? So we can't do any problem solving when that lid is flipped off, when that back part of the brain is in the driver's seat. It's fight, flight, freeze, or fawn. We need to work to get that thinking cap back on our brains, right? We all have to do this work, right? And especially if we're hyper aroused a lot, we need to be able to focus on things that are going to help us get that thinking part of our brain back online. And by and large, that's the skills that were shown in the latter part of the last presentation, which is a lot of grounding and getting back into the body and being present in the moment and really taking stock. Again, I'll say that I think a lot of us haven't been taught to observe what's going on in our bodies when we're under stress. I think we've spent a lot of time outside of our bodies and in our brains all the time and in our thinking brains. And I think there's a pretty big disconnect for many people between what's happening in their body and what's happening in their minds and integrating those things. So what does this mean? I think for you as anyone who's a caregiver in the room, or first responders, I know you are, is you need the mask on yourself first. You need to put the mask on yourself first here. And so how do you parent through emotion regulation for your kids, first for yourself and where you may be at around the skills that are needed to develop that in you? And really, it's a parallel process, even the work we do, because we don't specialize, unfortunately, with working with first responders. We certainly have worked with first responders. We certainly have a very trauma-informed and attachment-based philosophy to our services. But the process is always parallel. I think for a lot of years in our field, in child and youth mental health, there was this sort of notion that kids broke and fix the kid. And kid's part of a tree that involves lots of different pieces, you know, has a foundation, has apples, and there's all different things that are connected there, that when caregivers work in our services, we really need them to be a part of the process and putting the oxygen mask on themselves. So doing a little bit of that work on what might be getting in the way for me, what is it that I might be stressing about, how is that impacting my child or their development, and it's just to invite that curiosity again with really focusing on what's needed for the adults and the caregivers. We always talk from an attachment lens, like adults have to be the stronger and the kinder and the wiser, because where we are different than children is we do have a fully developed brain. You know, children don't. People don't have a fully developed brain, into their 20s. The good thing about that is there's some plasticity to that neurodevelopment that can be regenerated and shifted and changed. But what it means from a treatment perspective, from a relationship perspective, is that we really need parents to be on a parallel journey with whatever work they need to do to be able to get, regulated and to be well to the best of their ability as well. And the good news is that we help with that, right? So, parents turn to us all of the time with uncertainty how to proceed through work with their children, with this experience, parenting is just such a neat experience in the sense that your heart can explode from the joy that kids can bring you and that experience with having your kids. And it can also be like the most challenging experiences because you get really triggered by your kids if they do anything that might activate something in you. It's just this kind of really interesting dynamic that can go both ways. And so we help parents a lot. It's a real priority and a focus for us in child and youth mental health because there's such a connection between what kids need and what adults have and the interrelatedness to all of those things. So, just to leave you with a few ideas about what I think is really the key elements of parent wellness and child wellness and their parallels is the self-awareness, the self-care, the empathy for you, for yourself, and holding that space for some compassion for your experience. Understanding attachment. If you haven't thought much about your own relationship style, like it's some of the work we do with people in children's mental health because how you get your needs met, how you relate to people, that shares some information for you to consider about your relationships with your child and with others. And people have kind of styles of attachment, the ways that they've learned to interact with the world. It can be a pretty interesting thing to think about for yourself. And really that influence and strength comes through relationship and focus on that relationship with your children and your youth. That really emotion regulation is key, and it's really much like building a muscle. Like emotion regulation is a skill that you have to work and develop and build on. Some of those grounding activities before, like consistent daily practice with things, are really important when it comes to emotion regulation and developing capacity. Understanding that connection between the mind and body, as we've talked about this evening in multiple ways, and also knowing where to go and what to do if you're needing more help than what you have available or what you can access within your capacity. So I don't know if anyone has any questions, but we will certainly open it up if you do. I know we were at the end of the night here, and so we've sat through quite a lot of really informative, good information. And like Liz said, we're so thrilled to have been invited here to interconnect the child and youth mental health piece with the different mental health care resources that you've been hearing about and exploring. And just my hat goes off to you with your work in critical incident stress, because I think it's really tremendous to see the organization as advanced as it is around the importance of occupational stress and workplace well-being. And I don't think every organization is as far along as Kitchener Fire Department is, and so I think it's really tremendous that this is all happening and that we're at this point in our society. So thank you for letting us be a part of this evening.
Okay, well that brings us to the end of our evening. I just want to thank everyone so much for coming out tonight. I really appreciate you all taking the time. We know everyone's lives are very busy, but it means a lot that you're here tonight. Just a couple quick thank yous. Everyone on the CIS peer support team, thanks so much for your help planning tonight, especially Jody, Sarah, Brandon, Todd, Doug, we were a big help as well. Bev helped out a lot, and everyone else really contributed to make tonight a success. Management, Chief Gilmore and Dimitra, deputies, and Vicky, thank you so much for your guys' support in this event tonight. It was a big help. Our support groups in the back, thanks so much for coming out tonight. It means a lot that you're here and supporting us as a department and our fire service. There's also some help from various staff, the City Kitchener here at the Pavilion, helping us with some AV setup and whatnot, so thanks a lot.
You forgot one big one.
What's that?
Thanks, Dan. This was Dan's brainchild. We just tagged along. Just really briefly before we go, did you want to do your draw? Did you pick the numbers or the tickets already? Just have someone pick it on the way up. We're in a pavilion. We might as well have a stag and doe style competition, right? Or contest, I guess. Wonderful, thank you.
Thanks.
So we have some gift certificates available. The first one, last digits are 255.
Trasker.
Come on up. Every time.
Every time.
Toonie toss? Thanks, man. And the next one is 283. Ah, Chris.
Thank you. You need proof?
No, that's good.
We trust
All right.
We trust it.
Together, I can go with it. How's that?
I guess also special thanks to our presenters tonight, Chris from the city, Doug and Barb, Kevin, thank you, and
Jenny and Liz
Jenny and
from
Liz
Lutherwood.
from
Sorry, I got that wrong.
Front Door Lutherwood. Really appreciate you guys speaking tonight. Words of advice to leave with tonight. We have a ton of resources out there. Use them. They're there. We're trying to make them as accessible as possible through our sites, through our support groups in the back. So they're there. Use them. Ask lots of questions, especially for newer people on the job. There's a lot of us around who have been through stuff or know people who have been through stuff. Just start asking questions. We're here. A lot of us don't mind talking.
And if there was one common sentiment throughout the night, it's on your table. It's been said a lot. There is a way. Make a plan and share it, don't wear it. Thank you.
Thanks so much.
Nice.